Greetings. I'm Jenny Robinson. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing my friend Mike Goupill. Mike was in the Navy on board the USS Midway and has offered to share some of his memories of the longest-serving aircraft carrier in the 20th century. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for your service.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Let's begin with the Midway and how it got to San Diego. First of all, where was it before? Where was it in its history?
Well, right before coming to San Diego, it was at the Bremerton shipyards up in Washington, decaying and rotting away and rusting away. It had been decommissioned some years before that, and it was just sitting there. Some very enlightened people here in San Diego decided they'd like to start a campaign to bring the ship here to San Diego and refit it or convert it back to what it was and use it as a museum. And that's how it got here.
And so they refurbished it here?
Yes.
That was a big job.
Very big job.
And
took
expensive.
Years.
Expensive.
And expensive. And I'm not sure how they financed it, but I know it took a lot of money.
Yeah. Do you think it was donations, or do you think the government?
Oh, I'm sure it was donations. So the government may have given some help here and there, but if they did, it was off the record.
And so it became a museum then?
It became eventually a museum, yes.
Okay, and they decided to put it right downtown in San Diego.
Yeah, there lied the rub, so to speak, because there was a lot of opposition. We were spoiling the scenery and the outlook of San Diego, and we're making it militarized. We had all sorts of objections and reasons why we shouldn't, and they were overcome eventually. And now it's one of the, they say it's the fifth largest attraction in a museum of the country.
So I guess that was a good move.
It was a good move.
It's an amazing visit to go there and to see all the fellows that used to be on board, right, that are volunteering?
The docents that are on there now, they're fascinating people, and they have memories like you would not believe.
Yeah, and they love to share them.
They sure do. They love their ship.
Yeah.
You know, some sailors are notoriously seagoing. They have feelings for the ships they're on. I don't think anything equals with the feeling that the former men that served on the Midway have for the Midway.
Huh, that's great, that's great. When I visited the Midway, we went into the dining area, which I guess has changed over the years, but the the docents that are on the tours, they are volunteers, is that
Yes.
correct? Have you ever done that?
And I've never done that.
Yeah.
Someday.
Yeah. They were talking about how when they were on the ship, the torpedoes would be under the tables where they ate.
Well, not physically. They would be in compartments under the tables.
Oh, okay.
So what they would do when food is served and the dinner's over or lunch is over, they clear the deck, and then they open the hatches and they bring up the torpedoes or bombs or ammunition or whatever. Because space is so precious that you have to utilize every single square inch.
I know, and you don't think that when you look at that giant ship. So how big was the ship, and how many people could be on the ship at one time?
Well, don't forget the ship is not new, and it was the biggest ship of its kind. I want to say it's about 3 football fields long. I might be a little exaggerating there, but thereabouts. And when I was aboard in 1960, there were 4,300 people.
That's a lot.
That's
That's a big cruise ship. Boy. So a little different on the makeup, though, on the bedding than a cruise ship.
Yeah. Very sparsely set for intermingling.
Yeah.
You had your cruise quarters for your enlisted folks. They had their bunk beds, if you will. And then your next up the line from the totem pole would be chief's quarters for chief petty officers. And they had their own set of bunks, if you will, staterooms. Then you had the officers, and that got better as the grade went higher. And there's a saying that there's only one bed on the Midway, and that's for the captain. Everyone else has a bunk.
Oh, yeah.
Some bunks are fancier than others, and in some cases, the enlisted men have like a hammock, if you will.
When you go now and look at the Midway, was it like that when you were there?
Yes, it's identical to the way it was.
So the bunks are this wide.
Well, they're just about wide enough for a skinny kid
Yeah.
to lie comfortably. And you have underneath your bunk, you lift it, it's hinged. You open the hinge, and there's storage units for your personal items. So that's maybe 2 feet wide by maybe 6 feet long.
Now, wait a minute. So you have the upper bunk, and there's space underneath there for storage?
No.
Oh, way underneath the bottom one.
No, under your mattress, under your.
Oh,
there's about that much
really?
space, yeah, and you put stuff in
I
there.
didn't notice that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Now you said a skinny guy could lie comfortably. They did not look comfortable to me. They were like, and then no mattress hardly at all.
A very thin mattress. When you're 18, you can sleep on nails. Doesn't
That's right.
bother you.
That's
yeah.
right. And then the showers.
Showers, yes. The showers, you had like 3 seconds, maybe 3 minutes to get wet, soap down and rinse. Although in the Midway, the water went off automatically. So you didn't.
You didn't have to time it. It just went off after 3 minutes.
Then it would come back on again. So you have time to wet down,
quick.
soap down, and rinse out and get out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now, was it warm water or?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was warm even when it turned on and.
But it was fresh water, and fresh water is precious on a ship.
Yeah, I'll bet.
No,
I'll
that-
bet. So, and was everybody required to shower?
Oh yes.
Because
yeah.
otherwise, you're in
No,
close
no,
quarters.
Yes, the Navy was strict about so many things, but they were really on your back about that. I mean, you showered daily, and sometimes if you had a lousy job, you showered twice a day,
Huh?
and they were very concerned about that
Yeah.
because you're sitting in a tube, an enormous tube, with all sorts of people, and they're coughing and they're doing all the things that you do every day, and you're trapped.
That's right.
So the worst thing you can think of is having an outbreak of anything, any sickness.
So, were you one of the first people on the ship, or
No, the ship. When I went on the ship, had already made history. You know, the Midway was named after the Battle of Midway, and the Battle of Midway, the Second World War, was 1943, I believe, and it was the turning point of the war. The battle was so significant that it practically destroyed the enemy's ability to function as a Navy power. And so for that reason, and if none else, they named the biggest and best ship at the time the USS Midway.
And so you weren't on it until the 60s. So
Right.
it had already been a lot of places by the time you got on it.
Right. Now, when I went aboard, it was based at Yokosuka, Japan. And I was stationed in Seattle, Washington at the time. And I was on these big twin-engine Navy bombers. Believe it or not, the Navy had bombers in those days. And so the squadron was transferred to Yokosuka, and then the whole squadron went aboard the Midway.
So that was your first trip
On the Midway,
west
yes.
of California.
Correct.
That must have been quite an experience.
It was. I was my second enlistment. I enlisted for 4 years the first time. This was my second re-enlistment for 2 years, primarily to get on the West Coast and to see the Far East and do all that.
Oh, so you purposely chose that?
Yes, I did.
Very good. What was your role?
Well, at that particular, on the Midway, I was a electronic technician, what they call in-flight technician. In other words, I flew the ships, I say ships, the aircraft, but we call them ships to some degree. But the aircraft we were on was called an A3D. It's a Douglas bomber, and it had a pilot and co-pilot, and they had a third crewman, and that was me. The third crewman was aboard just to ensure that everything functioned well electronically, because the pilot and co-pilot were too busy doing other things. So I had a jump seat, what they call a little jump seat,
Little
like
fold-down thing.
fold-down thing, and I was behind the pilot. Actually, behind the co-pilot. There were 4 seats, 2 in the front and 2 right behind them.
Good. So you could see out the
Oh,
front.
yeah.
You could see what was happening. And did you always know the pilot, or 4,000 people on board? Did you?
No,
you-
we were a tight crew.
Yeah.
We all knew each other.
Okay. Did you fly with the same pilot all
Yeah,
the time?
almost always. Almost always, yeah.
So you trusted him.
I had no choice.
Yeah, really. And you did what kinds of reconnaissance, or what did you do when you were in the? What was your pilot's job?
Well, I'll tell you, it's don't forget, you're talking about the 60s, in the middle of the Cold War. And this particular airplane was the only airplane the Navy had that could deliver an atomic bomb. So that was our function. And we had atomic bombs on board, not unarmed, I have to emphasize. They were not armed.
But you know what one looks like?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Big?
Big.
Like how big?
Oh, I would say like you know the little mini cars that they have now that look like half a car?
Yeah.
You take one of those and just stretch it out a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty big.
Amazing. Okay, so you had two different crews on the ship. You had an air crew.
Right. Well, we had air crew and ship's company. A ship's company are the folks that are on board the ship almost their entire enlistment.
Oh, they're the regulars. They're
the regulars. If you and they're the boilermen. They're the people that work the controls. All the people that
Cooks.
maintain the ship, the cooks, all of that, and then so they run the ship. But now you have a bunch of these air groups coming on. We used to call them airedales, like a dog. Yeah. And so my squadron came on, and we have a certain function on the ship, and we have certain places to stay and all of that. And then there'd be other squadrons from other parts of the country.
And they'd stay for different lengths of time, or everybody would stay for the whole?
You stay for the cruise. Now the cruise on the Midway when I was there was 18 months, a long cruise. I think today it's like 12 months or 8 months, but this was 18 months. So they flew us out to Yokosuka. We got aboard the ship, and of course, you're going aboard the ship, and all the ship's company guys are looking, look at that one.
Oh, no kidding.
Sure, because you're intruding on their world.
Yeah.
So they know that you're there for a purpose and all of
Right.
that. But
Now, were you a new recruit at that point?
no.
You had already been around the block a little.
I wasn't an old salt, but I was a salt. And there had to be maybe, I'm guessing when I say maybe, as many as 60 or 70 men on the flight deck doing different functional things, each wearing a different colored jersey. So they could be identified by the air boss and the captain that's up in the island of the carrier. And so if you had a brown shirt, you were considered handlers, plane handlers, and doing things that around the aircraft, they park it and position it or move it if you wanted it moved. If you were a green shirt, you were a technician that's doing technical work on the airplane. If you were a red shirt, you did fire and ordnance. If you had a white shirt, you would be the first aid or medical and that type of thing.
Were there any accidents?
Oh yeah, there were quite a few. But I would say maybe in a 6-month cruise, you have maybe 2 or 3 serious accidents, maybe 1 fatality, that type of thing.
Where a plane would crash?
No, where somebody got hurt on the flight deck.
I see.
Once in a while, you'd have somebody get blown over the side because
Oh.
the airplane turns while it's running, and somebody is where they shouldn't be.
Oh, boy.
And everything stops, and they pick them up. Usually, they pick them up. There are 2 helicopters flying off the starboard side while during flight operations, in case an airplane goes in. Or
Every time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All the time?
All the time.
Wow. Mike, what was it like being on the flight deck?
On the flight deck. Well, Ginny, you would not believe it. It's only the only way I can explain it. It's controlled chaos because you have people running all over the place. You have men. Well, in those days it was men. Now you have men and women doing various functional things on the flight deck while the planes are shooting off and catapulting off or coming in and landing.
How often did they take off? I mean, every...
Well, it depends on the mission, but
Okay.
if you're going someplace where they're going to do war games, you might shoot a plane off every 45 seconds. That's how fast, yes. I'll tell you one story. I don't tell it very often because a lot of people really don't believe it. It was during one of the crises in the world. I don't know if it was Lebanon or one of those things. Now, this is the 50s. This is the Cold War at its height. And there was something going on in Lebanon because we were in the Mediterranean then. And they had 2 carriers, two aircraft on each catapult. There were 2 catapults on the front of the carrier. A catapult is what they use to jettison the airplane off.
So it would be like one would take off and then 45
Correct.
seconds
Yeah.
the other one would
Right.
take off.
Now, these both were armed with nuclear weapons.
Oh, boy.
God's honest truth. And they were hot all the time. In other words, the engines were turning all the time. That's how dangerous it was. We didn't know if we were going to war or not, and it would be a nuclear war.
Oh, so it was constant
Constantly.
idling?
They would change pilots without shutting the aircraft down.
Gosh.
And they would refuel, which is almost the most dangerous thing you can do, is refuel an airplane while it's running. But that's how weird the situation was. And I think they did that for about not quite 2 days till the crisis abated itself. But that was the worst I've seen, where anything could have happened, and times were such. I mean, you talk about today, people are afraid of what's going to happen. You know, I remember home, there were people that had fallout shelters because of thought of imminent attack.
That's right.
But that's an example on the flight deck of something that I'll never forget. But aside from that,
Can I ask you, how
Yes.
did you get the information? Did somebody give an announcement that this is what's happening and this is what we're doing? Or do you just get your superior officer tells you what to do and you just do it?
they tell you as little information as you need. Just that's what you're going to do. These planes will be hot all the time. You're gonna refuel, and you're gonna change crews while it's running, etc.
And you don't know why.
Don't know what, but you find out later.
Yeah.
Just you keep your mouth shut and do what you're told.
Right, right. So did planes ever have trouble landing?
Sometimes they're short on fuel, and they have to clear the deck to bring the plane in, and they have to. There are 3 wires, 3 cables. The wires are this big around,
Oh, wow.
and the deal is to get the center wire if you can. But if you're in trouble, you don't care which wire it is, as long as you get back down.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Now, what was the sound level then when you were up there?
Well, everybody had ear protections, so but it's still very loud.
Yeah.
You don't talk to each other because you make sign language,
Oh.
so they know.
So, and the sound, did it reflect throughout the whole ship down below as well?
Well, down below, when they landed a plane, it sounded like the whole ship is falling apart. And when they shoot a plane off, it's also the same way. Everything shudders.
And you're trying to sleep.
Well, you get used to that. You can sleep anywhere when you're that. Again, you're that young. You're a young kid. You can put up with anything.
Yeah. Now, did you have a curfew that you had to go to bed at a certain time,
No.
or could you stay up as long as you wanted?
As long as you wanted. And there was food available pretty much almost 24 hours a day. You
Wow.
can get a hamburger down in one little section. So I mean, food-wise, they're pretty good.
And how about entertainment?
No, movies. They have a few movies once in a while, and we were very limited. I mean, you didn't have the ability to call home. That
Like
was
they do
impossible,
now.
as they do now. Yeah. So,
And when you went into port, then that's when you
well,
all hell would break loose, huh?
yeah, kind of. You might find we might pull into port 8 o'clock in the morning, so the guys, everybody jumps off the gangway and you head for the bars. Well, the bar owner already knew that we were going to be there, so he's got 4 or 5 geisha girls all dressed up in evening gowns. 8 o'clock
At
in
8
the
o'clock
morning.
in the morning. Oh, boy.
All made up, yes.
Oh, boy. Well, so any other stories that you can think of?
Some of them are not very pleasant. And some of them are just kind of funny. Tattoos. Like today, everybody's got a tattoo that wants them, I guess. But tattoos really in those days were reserved mostly for people in prison and sailors.
That's right.
And this one guy had a tattoo on his neck, dotted lines along the neck, and it says, "Cut on dotted line."
Oh, my gosh.
And there are some that I can't repeat publicly, but
Yeah, I remember the old anchor. They always had an anchor on their arms.
and
yeah.
but the first thing the kids always got was mom. See,
Oh, of
they
course,
get a
of
mom
course,
tattoo,
of
and all is forgiven when he goes home.
That's right. That's
But
right.
And there's other situations. You have the heartbreak when a kid gets a Dear John letter and all of that. He's got no place to go, so he goes to the chaplain's office, and gets some comfort there. But there you are, alone in the world, as far as you're concerned,
Right.
when something like that happens.
Very heartbreaking.
Packages from home, gold. They're gold. Even if it's a bunch of cookies or whatever it is, that's like Christmas.
Yep. Even though they were broken to bits.
You didn't care. And everybody got a little bit, but you always shared.
Yeah.
That was part of the deal.
So when you were out, how was the food?
The food is good. The food is very good. The old one of the chefs on the Midway used to tell people that you get the best food. He said, in fact, see this hat? It's a chef's hat. This hat's the most important hat in the Navy because it determines what you eat, what you're going to have. The ship's mess for the enlisted people was appropriated by Congress. You have to have so many ounces of meat, so many ounces of starch. It was well regulated. On the officers' mess, they had to buy their own food. They had to chip in on a weekly basis to buy the food that they were going to be served.
Is that still true?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm talking 50 years ago.
Oh
I
my
don't know.
gosh, that seems really unfair.
But they had servants. They had cutlery. They had all that niceties of dining room service. But they had to pay for their food.
But when you went to different ports, you'd have to decide what food was available.
No, the purser, for lack of a better term, he ships company, and he decides what's going to be bought, what's practical buying, because not everything's available.
So it's kind of like a cruise ship where you have to think in terms of 4,000 people, milk and eggs and sugar, and you have to know that the port is going to be there with all that stuff ready when you get there, because you're only going to be there for a short time.
But you also have cargo ships, Navy ships that come alongside. Oh. If you're going to be out at sea and you're not going to be in port for 45 days, 50 days, then you have to have ships come and meet you, and they will transfer cargo at sea. They do it by pulleys.
Wow.
And they do the same thing with fuel. Because today we have the atomic age where that's not a big deal, but in those days it was diesel fuel. And they have to be refueled at sea. So.
And they had big hoses that went across?
And when those hoses break, and they do occasionally, it sprays.
Oh my gosh. Oh. And mail, they had to go back and forth.
The mail was another one. Sometimes the mail would be come in by way of aircraft, like a small transport aircraft.
Sure.
And other times by the same method as you get supplies or fuel. It made you a little ingenious as far as what you can do. To give you an example, technically speaking, you couldn't have any liquor on the ship. So guys would go ashore, 3 or 4 days, whatever, and they'd come back.
Get really drunk.
But they would sneak stuff aboard.
Yeah. And
what they would do is they take a bottle of Listerine, the Listerine bottles, and they would empty it out and fill it with booze. So it'd be one bottle be sitting there, and next to it would be another bottle with real Listerine in it, with a cap just off a little bit so it smelled.
But you never did that.
Definitely.
No. So do you have fond memories of those years, or were they really brutal?
No, I tell you, I have fond memories, and I'm really thankful. I have to explain this a little bit. The Navy gave me structure, gave me a purpose, and allowed me to succeed or fail. Prior to that, I've been a bit of a gutter snipe, and I thought I would be a wise guy, because you need to be a wise guy in order to survive on the streets of New York.
Yeah.
So something told me, you better get out of this one way or the other, and so joined the Navy. And
did you join with anyone else?
No, just by myself.
Did you have any other New York guys there with you?
Yes, quite a few.
Were they all smart guys like you?
Smarter than me.
Smart Alex?
Smarter than me in many ways. In fact, in the first waning days, we first started, I should say, you go to the classroom, they're going to teach you whatever they're going to teach you. And one instructor said, all right, now, all you New Yorkers, stand up. Now, all you Texans, you stand up. He put all the New Yorkers on one side of the room, because they were the big troublemakers.
Oh,
the
my
Texans
gosh.
and the New Yorkers. Yeah. So
That's funny.
Yeah, and you buddy up after a while. You find you have things in common, and so after a while you kind of look out for each other, and it works out okay.
That's good.
But the thing I wanted to emphasize is that for a kid to be able to be rewarded by someone in authority for doing such a great job and get promoted, that is the thing that I didn't have prior to joining the service. So it gave me a purpose and a sake of being and I knew that I can succeed.
And ability to work with a boss.
Yeah, to work with others, to work as a team,
Yeah.
because there was no long ranges. Well, there's no long rangers and all of that. You have to work as a team,
Right.
and I learned that.
Did you know any that didn't make it?
Yeah.
And not that died in combat. I mean that didn't
No.
make the grade as far as the.
Yeah. There were some that had no business being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were really.
I'm sure that still are.
Yeah, and a lot of kids were running away from something. They had gotten in trouble with the law or something, and the judge may have said, "Okay, jail or the military."
Oh boy.
So you had
Oh
some of
boy.
that.
So you got stuck with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But you learn an awful lot. You learn to cope with people from all over the country, all over the world in some cases, and
That's the other thing. You had to learn how to get along with people that you would
Absolutely.
never have met in a million years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was still segregation to a degree
Yeah.
in the military. That's not so much that they could point it out and say, "Don't do that," but it was kind of like hidden.
Mm-hmm.
And I got criticized because that I was getting too friendly with the black people.
Yeah, because in New York, I
Yeah.
guess you were used to it.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, this has been eye-opener for me. I really learned a lot, and I enjoyed hearing about your experience personally.
Yeah.
And I do hope, I know that there's more we can talk about, but I'm afraid our time is up.
Well, we'll
so-
do it some other time and some other subject.
That's right. All right.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. Really appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.